So over the years, I've gotten a bit of a reputation around the Cobra Kai community as the guy who can make very accurate predictions. I had a knack for it. I don't consider it a superpower. The method mostly involved not just focusing on what I wanted to happen or what I thought would be cool, but also what makes the most sense for the story, and most importantly, what do the creators and people making the story think should happen? If you understand the people who are behind it, you can understand what is to come. So several years ago, when Sony announced they were making a new Karate Kid movie, I was extremely skeptical. Why? What's going on here? It was a Karate Kid movie that had no involvement from John, Josh, and Hayden, who together revived the franchise with Cobra Kai. Also, the initial plot description was weird. It said a young teenage martial artist was going to train an adult to fight, reversing the sensei-student roles that the franchise has always had. It was clear this is a movie born out of executive edict. The president of Sony Pictures Film wanted to tap into the success of Cobra Kai and make use of their IP for a surefire hit. Keep in mind, this same studio president had the idea of an entire Spider-Man extended universe, using whatever property they had under that domain. From the start, I was very negative about the idea. A year later, when Jackie Chan and Ralph Macchio were suddenly announced as being in the film, I didn't change my tune. In fact, it was clear they had to massively rewrite the script after getting them on board. If they were initially a part of the movie, they would have been announced at the beginning. That made me even more skeptical about the whole smelly thing. Now, in fairness, I'll note I've been wrong many times over the years. I thought Hilary Swank would come back as Julie Pierce. I thought Kreese would die in season 3, much sooner than his eventual explosive fate. So even the best can get things wrong. And with that in mind, I must say, Karate Kid Legends is absolutely everything I ever predicted it would be. Welcome back everyone for another It's Sad to Be Right Karate Kid Legends Watch Party. And yeah, Watch Party is right again. This movie is ridiculous in ways you couldn't even imagine. Honestly, I get secondhand embarrassment that apparently teams of people, from director Jonathan Entwistle to the writer to the studio execs, not to mention Jackie and Ralph, looked at this script, nodded their heads in enthusiasm and said, yeah, this is the movie we should be making. Now, before I go any further, I should point out there are some definite positives to this movie. We can definitely say overall the cast is pretty likable. Ben Wang as Lee is easygoing and relatable. I'm not going to sit here and proclaim him to be the next big thing because I'm not sure about that, but I do think he fits this role very well and is definitely an overall asset to the film. I actually think Sadie Stanley as Mia was pulling double. She brought a much needed charm to the movie that didn't exist anywhere else. Her character in some ways was as interesting as Lee in that apparently she's also growing up in a single parent household and dealing with an extremely difficult home life. Even more so than Lee. This perhaps could have been an interesting storyline to explore as the two got to know each other, but I'm not even sure the filmmakers were aware of it because it's not really touched upon at all. Big missed opportunity here. Now, Joshua Jackson as Mia's dad was like a little odd. He's likable in his way, but the problem is the writing for the character he's playing. Ultimately, that's a problem with all these characters, but we'll get to that in a minute. Finally, Jackie Chan and Ralph Macchio, they both turn on the charm they're known for, and it, well, mostly works. They are likable, but they exist almost as separate entities within the story framework, probably because they are. But again, that's another writing problem which we will get to shortly. Now, the other positive point, and this may be the sole saving grace of the movie, is that director Entwistle does a good job of keeping the story moving. Say what you will, but the movie doesn't have any slow or boring parts. At no point was I thinking, what the hell, just get on with it. Anyone who is giving the movie a good review or claiming it's fun or being positive about it in any way is really essentially reacting to this main point. It tells its story without slowing down. The film does keep your attention. That puts it ahead of a lot of other slog fests out there and is a definite positive. Now, the downside to that is that it has a very short runtime of an hour and a half. The characters are underdeveloped, and more importantly, the character relationships are never fully allowed to grow into something special. And that brings us to the biggest failing of the movie. The original Karate Kid thrived on the relationship between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi. Daniel had lost his dad, growing up with a single mom. His struggles in the new high school could easily be seen as the difficulties of being fatherless. Yeah, he had a loving and attentive mom, but there was no one there to teach him how to be a man, how to stand up for himself. That is where Mr. Miyagi came in. It was the foundation of their entire relationship. Lee doesn't really have that with Mr. Han or anyone. The film opens with him already training with his uncle, Mr. Han. That relationship immediately puts in a different role than the original Daniel, Mr. Miyagi. He's not searching for a father figure, and since the relationship is already well established, there's no arc or journey. They don't discover each other and peel back the layers, growing as they realize they fill a role for the other. They just fall into the predefined and predetermined archetypes the entire time they're on screen together. There's no change or growth, it's just, hey, we already have this going. Now, I mentioned how Ralph Macchio was thrown in last minute, and that is very clear in how he's introduced. Mr. Han randomly comes to America and then suddenly decides he needs to go to Los Angeles for his friend. Why did he decide that? Who knows? How did he know Daniel kept training with Mr. Miyagi and would be available? No idea. According to him, he only learned about Daniel one time in 1985. Don't ask questions, you hater. The film explains it all away with a Miyagi-verse multiverse. Apparently here the events of Karate Kid 2 take place in 1986 and not 1985 like in the original story. They throw in a bunch of bullshit how the two families knew each other for years and Mr. Han was a friend of Mr. Miyagi, even though Mr. Han was a poor handyman in China. And you get the impression never left China, much less went to visit Mr. Miyagi in LA. Mr. Han says Lee is to him like Daniel was to Mr. Miyagi, completely ignoring Dre from the other movie, which is kind of funny. But it's also not true because Lee is his nephew. Really, they aren't super alike. Either way, Daniel eventually comes to New York to train Lee for some reason. Lee accepts the random new sensei, and it's really not clear what Daniel is offering that Mr. Han doesn't. Like, the movie makes a point that he wants Daniel to teach Miyagi karate, but I'm not sure what that is supposed to be. At one point, I thought the movie was how Connor knew mixed martial arts, and they needed another style to counter that. But really, that was my own imagination. It's mostly just scenes of them bouncing around with each other. Of course, what I have been describing is a coherent story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Except this movie has an entire other movie shoved into the middle. This is the remnants of the original idea where the young student was teaching the adult. In this case, Mia's dad is in bad with loan sharks and he needs to earn money. And the most ridiculous thing I've seen in a while is back-to-back scenes of Lee gets his ass kicked by Connor, who fights with him with no hands, only for later that night, he single-handedly beats up 3 mafia muscle men sent up to rough up Victor. He kicks their asses so bad, Victor, who apparently is a multiple citywide boxing champion, decides he should learn from Lee. It was so stupid and nonsensical, my wife, who did not know about this plot line, leaned to me and asked how he could beat 3 mafia enforcers who presumably train at the same dojo as Connor after he just got his ass kicked by one teenage kid. I told her, don't worry, just go with it. I also love how Victor, who won multiple championships, decides he needs to learn boxing from this kid from China who his daughter is hanging out with. It's dumb, it doesn't make sense, and the more you think about it, the more frustrating it becomes. That brings me to another good moment when Daniel is giving Lee the headband and saying this 2 branches, 1 tree thing. My wife leaned over and said, but there's more than 2 branches on that tree. Little did she know that is exactly what I said about the trailer when I covered it. That made me laugh. I married the right person. Oh, and also the loan shark in question is the guy who owns the dojo Connor trains at. I started laughing for a full minute as I considered O'Shea, that's his name, is apparently a small businessman, successful entrepreneur, and mafia loan shark. I guess you have to diversify in this economy. There are other thoughts about Victor as well, like if he's now in a financially secure position, why doesn't he take out an actual loan from a bank to pay back the loan sharks? Who knows? Is he really a good father if he puts himself and family in jeopardy by doing business with shady people? You would think so. And why does O'Shea take him out when if he wins the match, he would at least be able to pay back something? Who knows, and don't ask. The 5 Boroughs tournament is sort of dumb. By my calculations, out of all in New York for a $50,000 first prize, there were only 16 entries. In fact, Lee only has to win 4 matches to win the whole thing. He literally doesn't even fight in all 5 boroughs. He just fights in 4. Also, it's seemingly implied Lee gave the prize money to Victor, which makes you wonder who really owns the pizza shop. In summary, Karate Kid Legends can only be any good if you shut off your brain and just enjoy the visuals. The moment you think about the movie, even a little bit, it crumbles to shreds. I think it's an insult to everything that came before it, and is truly a money grab trying to ride on the success of Cobra Kai. And it's the brainchild of a studio president who just wants to make his annual bonus. I guess that's Hollywood, baby. Have a great day. I'll see you at the next watch party.